Good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us on this highlight show of the evening review. My name is Toibon Jabela, your host. This week we started a conversation with the newly elected president of NANSO, Dortia Nangolo, who was elected as president of that student organization at a recently concluded Congress, and she came in to share with us her vision for the new job.
NANSO is strategic, not radical. I'm saying this because the late Dr. Hage Geingob, in his remarks at our last Congress, the 70th National Students Congress, he mentioned that every wave of African leaders has its generational mandate. Similarly, every wave of NANSO leaders has its own mandate. In 1984, we had to be on the streets. We had to demonstrate, and we had to show the imperial government that the students did not want anymore. That needed to be done. But the toying of 1984 cannot be done in our times today because times are a bit different. It requires a different NANSO. And I think when people ask, why aren't you radical? Why aren't you on the streets? NANSO can only be here 40 years later because we are able to evolve with the times and we are able to amend ourselves. We are able to understand the generation that we serve in. Today, Toivo, the most powerful tool is social media. If we want to shake the country, I'm telling you, if we really want to shake this country, we are going to use social media. You know, and it's no longer going to the streets because this is a generation that does not understand the power of going to the streets. You cannot take a person born in 2005 to the streets because they don't understand that. And this is why so many protests being held, young people don't show up. There's a concern there, yes, and we have to evolve with the times and say that young people are actually more present on social media. What are we doing on social media? Petitions and so forth. But of course, NANSO remains where we need to be radical. I tell you now, we will be radical. Where we need to shut down Government Park, we'll shut down Government Park.
That's a good point because at least you're not completely ruling out radicalism because leaders want obedient people. Even in situations where you must speak up, leaders enjoy it when people are obedient. Organizations like NANSO are obedient, labor unions are obedient, the pressure groups are obedient, and then they can do whatever they want. But I think, and it's not for me to say, but I think where a particular situation summons the radicalism in all of us, that we stand up and do that. Let's talk about the policy issues. We have many challenges in our education. Some learners are learning, are taught under trees, NASFAV. There are always questions there. Some people are saying, they are trying their best. Some are saying more can be done. Especially you spoke about converting loans, study loans into grants. What are some of the thorny issues that you constantly hear as NANSO from your members?
I think the biggest issue, or most of our issues, are really around higher education. Of course, at basic education, we have issues of access, we have issues of infrastructure, we have issues of whether our learners have textbooks, you know, and moving into a digital era as well. But the biggest issues that we are constantly faced with, or maybe it's because we, as NANSO, we're able to attain one of our aspirations, which was a basic education. And that is why higher education becomes so critical to us. It's, for instance, student accommodation. As we speak, we have students who are paying 3,500 to share in a room of 4 people. The accommodation is unregistered. It is not safe. So there's need to regulate student accommodation in this country in terms of the rent and also in terms of safety of our students. We have another issue, which is transport. Every single day, a student is leaving campus and they're at risk. They're at risk of being attacked. They're at risk of losing their laptops, their study materials. It's a concern, and it calls on us to come up with suitable solutions. We also look at just the state of higher education in general. It's not accessible. It's very, very expensive, like I said. So these are some of the strongest issues that we have to deal with every single year. It's these 3 issues.
Speaking of secondary education, there are challenges there.
Yes.
The failure rates are very, very
Yes.
high. Every time when the national exam results are announced, you know, really, really high. I think we saw in January when about 74 or something % of those who sat for national exams last year failed. Is that something that keeps you awake at night, and how are you addressing the authorities on that?
Definitely. I think the results or the performance is something that really is critical to us as NANSO, because every single year we are concerned. And we cannot act like everything is normal in a country when we don't even have 50% pass. It's scary, it's worrisome. And our engagement with the ministry or with government has always been, we need to take a proactive approach at addressing the issues. In 2022, we addressed the issue of infrastructure. We did our Access to Education campaign, and we focused on infrastructure, and we took it back to government to say that, look, we need classrooms, we need schools. And government then decided to construct a few more classrooms and schools. Early this year, we saw that there was an announcement there. This year again, our Access to Education campaign focused on, look, apart from classrooms and textbooks and materials that students don't have, what is the other issue that we are overlooking? And that was social issues. And it's something that it's so easy to ignore in education, because you're focusing on the material things in education, but you forget that there's early and unintended pregnancies. You're forgetting that there's substance abuse, which has become so common in our schools. You're forgetting that there's child-led homes. You're forgetting that there are so many issues, child labor. And it was eye-opening when we were in the regions, especially the northern regions, Toivo. We have learners who are going to school on an empty stomach. From school, this person has to go find a job, they have to go work. We have learners that are being taken from school to get married. And it's such a scary thing, but these are some of the issues that we also need to address. Apart from the material things in education, we must actively work towards addressing the social issues as well.
Yeah. Also in the Namibian Sun this week, we reported about a breakthrough that doctors have made in Namibia about the heart surgeries. This new breakthrough will save government an average of $4 million that they spend on sending a single patient abroad for such procedures. In studio, we had Dr. Feni Shidika to reflect on that breakthrough.
Because congenital heart disease is complex and it's got a lot of nuance. And you have to be trained in it to actually understand the physiology and how you actually tailor your management. We should be individually tailored as per lesions. And I think what makes it complex is that there are too many lesions. And while there is that heterogeneity, there is also an individual pattern. Just because you've got the same lesion, it doesn't mean that you will behave the same way, because everybody has their own physiology and genetic code. And that is sort of what determines the behavior going forward in the postoperative care, for instance. So because I had a good team, I thought we were ready to engage complex stuff. We generally sensitize our teams way beforehand, so I share a list of the patients that we intend to operate on. Under normal circumstances, these operations would be going to South Africa, because my team we only are doing a certain level of thing. We have risk stratification scores from 1 to 6, and we have started doing 1, 2, 3 comfortably, but the high 3, 4 to 6, those ones I still send them to South Africa while we are developing local capacity. Full local capacity with trained cardiac nurses, with everybody. But I'm pleased and very privileged to say that our nursing team probably has done the most pediatric and congenital heart disease care in the country. So I'm more comfortable to work with them than any other hospital in the country.
So in the state nursing?
Absolutely, absolutely. And equally the doctor's team, I have a full set that is not found anywhere else in the country. So I'm more comfortable to operate there, besides the fact that we're dealing with 90% of the population and the variation, then means that you've got enough volume to keep you relevant as a cardiologist or as a surgeon. And that's the reason why we do that. So we did, all of them were complex.
Can you just give us, in layman's terms, what you did last week?
So we did about 9 operations. So 3 of them, they were getting done in the country for the very first time. The first one we did on Tuesday starting was, so Monday we did tetralogy of Fallot's. That we have done before, and we've got a very good survival rate in general in Namibia since we started our congenital heart surgery program. On Tuesday, we then started off with a newborn who was 3 weeks old with transposition of great arteries, and that's when the pipes that supply the body and the lungs respectively are bone switched around. And now the duty of the surgeon is to try and switch them back in such a manner what God would have created the heart to be. But this one had a little bit of nuance around it. So the hole that is allowed, it's as like cardiology is like physics, but a physics of blood flow. So transposition of great arteries, we call it parallel circulation. And to be able to be alive, you need to break that parallelness because the circuit of blood flow is supposed to be in series. And you need a communication usually between the two top chambers of the heart to mix blood and make sure that there is enough mixing in that parallel circulation. So this one was born with a small communication, and I had to break it to open it before we prepare the patient for surgery, because he was on a ventilator and was critical, and we could not have kept him like that until the operation. So I had to break and create a new hole, a bigger hole in the intertidal septum between the 2 top chambers of the heart before the definitive procedure. And while we were waiting for that, we had to keep a certain pipe open called a patent access arteriosus. But those are abstract things, and I don't want to get too much into the detail of them. Yeah. So the surgeon successfully switched the pipes around. Of course, it was a complex operation because it's a newborn, 3 weeks. The organs are immature, and you have to connect them to a lung pump machine. In the baseline of the patient, there was infection in the background. There was a lot of things in the background. So we started off with what we would call a moderate substrate. And that usually means that then the bypass might get complicated, and the technical implications are also quite serious because it's a very complex operation and a lot of surgeons are still finding their feet doing it properly. So she done perfectly as it should be. The postoperative care was a little bit hard, but we had a very trained team, and the patient now is de-escalating nicely, is recovering nicely. So that was Tuesday, and then we did another operation, but it wasn't so complex because we don't like mixing complex with complex. We like mixing them up so that you can tailor and make sure that you have nice acuity over the patients in the cardiac ICU. Then on Wednesday, we did even more complex. It was a patient with quite a history. 13 months old. He was born and we diagnosed him at 2 months old. And what had happened to him is that he had gone to Cape Town. I had referred him there, knowing that those kind of cases, as I said earlier, they were going to South Africa, to Cape Town, where we trained to handle them and operate them there. But then he went he was having an infection at the time, and he was cancelled on those merits, which was appropriate because the infection was so bad, and it was a bad bacteria that causes infection in the heart even, and it was causing multi-organ dysfunction. So they cancelled him, and they said, we cannot engage on a big procedure under these conditions, which was acceptable. So the patient came back. He had been airlifted there because he was oxygen dependent, and we looked after him, and then he recovered. And then we sent him home on oxygen. And I told the mother that I will get you a team that can fix this ideally locally, but my Cape Town colleagues, or my senior colleagues that trained me, were prepared to take the patient back in the future. So I decided to include him in the list, so he was done last Wednesday. That was the biggest operation that even in South Africa, not a lot of centers can perform it. It's called a Tausig Bing malformation. So it's a different type of great artery switched around with a big hole in the heart. But there's a lot of technical work that needs to be done there and needs a lot of technical expertise to perform it safely.
Also on the show this week, we had Dr. Daniel Nyaungwa, one of the depositors for the SME bank that was liquidated way back in 2017. The depositors remain in the dark. They have not been paid their money that was trapped in that bank when it was liquidated. And this week they held a meeting with the liquidators demanding what is due to them. Dr. Nyongwa spoke to our colleague Jemima Biekes.
Because there are many reasons.
Yes.
There are indications. We can see even the way the government established the SME bank. You know, all the parastatals, we have the Acts of Parliament which establishes that. For example, Air Namibia, we had Act on Air Namibia. Even if we go to UNAM, there's an Act. But there was no Act for SME bank. So exactly what was going to govern the SME bank? So this was a problem. The looting started as soon as those Zimbabweans went into office. That Enoch Kamshinda. Enoch Kamshinda had a history from Zimbabwe. That Metropolitan Bank, it looted all the Zimbabweans' money, and he ran away to South Africa then, and he came here. So did our government do any due diligence? And the running of the bank itself, there was virtually no Namibian there. HR manager was a Zimbabwean. So the setup and the governance of the bank itself, we wonder how Bank of Namibia approved such a structure in Namibia. So this is the first point. So when they started looting, I think they transferred how much, 200 million or something to South Africa. They said they are going to invest at Mamepo Capital. It was 200 million, almost 200 million. Out of that 200 million, when the liquidators followed, they only discovered that Mamepo only get 32 million. The rest was directly deposited into this guy's account. The looting. And that Mamepo Capital, they went to deposit in VBS. You know the problems of VBS. VBS was also being liquidated. How can you go and deposit money in a bank which is liquidating? So those are the issues. So that was grand looting from the onset. And the 65 million we are talking about, they allege that it went to buy what? A Caterpillar. How can you buy a Caterpillar and apparently based in West Africa? And the money is lying in Dubai. It was grand theft. And all the documents allegedly they were forged. So our government, whoever was in charge from Bank of Namibia, from Ministry of Finance, they are responsible for this.
So who do you think should take the fall for this?
You can't really say who. It is a system perhaps which failed. We used to talk of the depositor insurance for banks. We don't have that in Namibia. The one which is known as depositor, so that if a bank fails, what happens? The depositor will get their money, but we don't have it. So the system failed. That's what I can say.
So as depositors, have you not seen any red flags during the time the bank was still operational?
We did. It was too late. Indeed, it was too late. And the well-connected people, they were told in advance, and they took their money. The time we rushed to go and take our money, they were limiting the amount of money you can get. That was the issue. They will say, no, you can't take 10,000, just take 2,000. Until the bank was closed.
And you didn't speak to the finance minister at the time. You didn't know. You didn't realize.
There was no such a route which you can take according to the liquidation law. It's only liquidators.
But I mean, as aggrieved citizens,
we did some demonstrations. We did whatever we could do that time. We did marching, but we were told, no, you wait for the law to take its course. So we could not do anything as small depositors.
Would you say you have lost faith in the banking system in Namibia?
I hope Bank of Namibia is doing everything in order to control banks. But yes, to a certain extent, we've lost. One of our guys, I think you spoke to him yesterday, said, no, me I'm no longer keeping money in the bank. Once I raise a certain amount of money, I'll go and buy a property. I don't want to put my money in these banks anymore. So faith has been lost.
There were young people as well. Are there, how many young people are part of this?
We are still, you see what happened was we about 20,000 small depositors. Luckily, those ones who had 25,000 and below, they got their money. But those ones who were having 25,000 and above, they did not get their money. So the young people mostly, we still have, a lot of them. By that time, it's 10 years. Some were young now, they are old. Yeah, they are old. But we are talking of plus or minus 2,000 young people at the moment, owed by the bank. And we have also old people who cannot work anymore. They need that money.
Finally, on the show, we had Ombudsman Basilius Jauga, who is, of course, telling us about the rights of individuals in the country, especially in the build-up to the elections. He spoke on a variety of things, the rights of Namibians, the recent pronouncements around gay rights and same-sex marriages, as well as the demand that he had made to prison authorities to treat the fish rot accused people better. Here is what he had to say.
It's a very tough one, tough question, because the reason is in politics, you can't separate the economic concept or to empower your people economically. And you have to do it through political process or through legal process. So this is basically why politicians take these two routes. So when they fail in the political process, they can use the legal process. So that's actually the rule of game of politics. I'm not saying that constitutionally it is something that is allowed, but it is something that as a nation we have to stop through our legal processes. So if we have experienced that scenario and nobody have challenged it, then it means we have accepted it, that it is fine for politicians to get away with what they want to do in terms of satisfying their constituency, in terms of empowering them economically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, related to that, advocate, in November last year, you went to the Windhoek Correctional Facility. You were invited by the fish rot accused people, and they were telling you a lot of stories. We saw videos and Saki Shangala and everybody else. How did that come about? We don't see you going to jail a lot.
Well, we do unannounced visit to some interesting human rights institutions where some of the citizens are kept, particularly in detention, so that we can see the conditions and hear from their treatment in those institutions. This is basically what happened, and they then had to bring up these complaints that they brought up, because you must remember most of among the fish rot accused, despite Saki Shangala was the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General, meaning he's a lawyer himself. Former Minister Bernard Esau is also a lawyer, trained person. He studied law. So they know the laws of the country, they know the constitution. So they have tried their luck through the normal processes of the court to get what they were demanding. You know, back in the time, if you remember, they were demanding for facilities where they could prepare their cases and internet. These are all can be referred to as facilities.
Yes.
And back then, I think the correctional facilities and the prosecutor general, they were playing the referring games. The correctional facilities, the correctional national service, they will refer to the PG that they are the one who must decide on that one. Then the PG says, no, it is the correctional facility who must decide on that one. And eventually they didn't know where to go. That's how they came to my office and say, maybe I can intervene.
Those are the highlights of the evening review this week. We hope those conversations have been helpful to enlighten you on a thing or two. We wish you a blessed weekend.